You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
Among the plethora of camera brands on the market, none is as synonymous with luxury as Leica. For over a century, Leica has been crafting cameras that are renowned for their precision, craftsmanship, and innovation, and is one of the most revered names in photography. Last year, Leica celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Leica 1 camera, the first 35mm camera to be mass-produced, transforming the status quo with its portable design and compact size. It thus exploded a genre, street photography, that undoubtedly altered the public's perceptions of the world. Many of the most iconic photographers in history have shot important work on Leica cameras, contributing to the brand's outsized role in 20th century visual history. My guest on the luxury item is Mike Giannattasio, president of Leica Camera Americas. In his role, Mike leads the iconic brand's growth across US, Canada, and Mexico. With a career spanning more than 2 decades in luxury goods and consumer products, Mike Giannattasio is known for his innovative leadership and strategic vision. Under his leadership at Leica, the brand has strengthened its position at the intersection of photography, art, and craftsmanship, fostering collaborations with leading artists, photographers, and innovators. Prior to Leica, he held executive roles at Richemont and LVMH, where he honed his expertise in building and transforming luxury brands. Welcome to the Luxury Item, Mike.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Scott.
Thanks so much for joining me. I've been really excited to have you on. As everybody knows, Leica Camera is renowned for making premium, precision-engineered cameras and lenses for serious photographers and a historical pioneer of 35mm photography. But Leica's roots actually go back to 1849, and when it was founded as an optics workshop in Wetzlar, Germany, producing lenses, glasses, telescopes, and early microscopes even. This is long before Leica cameras actually appeared, which was in 1925. So how did Leica's core business evolve into building cameras?
Optics are an incredibly essential part of color science, of capturing light. And so Leica glass is so important to the final product. So I would say in 1849, the company was founded with Carl Kellner in Wetzlar.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after that moment, I would say, Oscar Barnack joined the company, and he was an avid photographer. He also had asthma, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, wanting to make a light camera or something that he could carry around was very, very important. And of course, he wanted to make large images from something very, very small. So I would say from 1914, the year that Barnack created the UR Leica by using the 35mm cinema filmed by turning the film sideways. Today, you cannot have a conversation about cameras or film and not include Leica in that conversation. And it was at that time, and now we're talking about in the 20s. And if you think about the historical time that we're in at that point, Scott, it was risky for a brand. And I know that today, there are other brands that use the word "just do it." But Ernst Leitz II, when he decided to commercialize photography, said, "I hereby decide we will take the risk to create the first portable camera." So I would say from 1849 to 1914 to the actual production of the first camera, there's this long history of optics, engineering, and desire to create something. In the end, most inventions come from a desire to create something, and that really is Oscar Barnack wanting to create a portable camera that can give you big images.
And as successful as Leica is, it's had its own challenges as a company and was late and resistant to digital as well as pressures intensifying by smartphones. In the early mid 2000s, Leica had to reorient its strategy to survive. And what's interesting to me is while smartphones became the default camera, Leica responded not by competing on cheap hardware, but actually doubling down on premium German made cameras and partnering with smartphone makers to put Leica branded imaging into phones themselves, recognizing them as opportunities to expand Leica's brand reach and gain mobile industry experience. So from a brand identity standpoint, that was a pretty big gamble for the company. Why did it work?
Well, I think why it works is, first of all, we celebrate anytime someone takes an image, regardless of what type of equipment that they're using. They're memorializing a moment, they're celebrating a moment in their life. It's interesting that people think that Leica competes. We don't compete on those specs. It's about teaching that first generation of mobile users what it would look like to shoot with a Leica camera, right? To show the contrast, the depth, the color science. There's a feeling, the Leica look as it's referred to. So by putting Leica optics in phones, we reach millions of people that we would never be able to through their first experience being through a rangefinder. It it would be, I would say it's very uncommon to imagine that someone's first experience with photography is directly through Leica. So by partnering with the phone industry, it's sort of creating a gateway for the brand. Leica gains insights into mobile photography, and and users gain the experience of what a Leica look is really like, Scott. So for it ensures that I worked at Mont Blanc for 15 years.
Mhm.
And at that time when we were working there, the superstores, Staples, Office Max, the onslaught of computers, people thought that writing was going to be dead. And in fact, the reverse was true. I think, that the increase in technology and sort of democratizing that really allows for a bigger platform and a wider audience. And whether that's in writing instruments or whether that's even in style with Conrands, this technology should aid and should really help. And so that's the way we feel this transition has really happened. So when people are comfortable using it in mobile technology, they will adapt that and then be curious about discovering what it's like to shoot with the real Leica once they've come to understand the color and the science and the feeling that you get, right? Because luxury products, products with this heritage, it's about the feeling that it creates, right? It's about the feeling that it gives.
And despite everybody using their smartphones as cameras, point and shoot cameras have actually been making a notable comeback, and younger photographers are discovering dedicated cameras and conscious low tech tools, which have been benefiting brands like Leica. What do you think has been driving this genuine revival? Is it being driven by technological innovation or content creation trends, or is there something greater cultural shift going on?
I do believe that there is a greater cultural shift going on. I believe um, that a lot of luxury brands and premium brands um, are now faced with the challenge with consumers, and that is to really be authentic and to share their story. And I think what makes photography and Leica interesting at this moment is exactly the onslaught of AI. What's real, what's not real. And a brand like Leica gives this consumer authenticity, history, craftsmanship, durability. And I would say that in a world, whether you're thinking about topics that are relevant today, we talk about sustainability. Leica is built as a sustainable brand, right?
Hmm.
People are using cameras that were built in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. So I think that at the core there is that Leica and photography are striking a moment because photography and the ability to capture this moment gives something to people that's real. And there's plenty of images that are being created. Uh, but there's something special about slowing down and taking that shot and celebrating that moment. I'm certainly of the age where I go back and I look at photo albums with my family and I think about those moments. And I think that there is a new audience today that is longing for that sort of connection.
And Leica has also been on a hot streak itself, experiencing a notable resurgence in both sales and cultural relevance over the last several years. Last year was Leica's 100th anniversary. It also achieved record sales for the fourth consecutive financial year with the highest revenue in its history, along with continued profitability. And while Leica's diversified, the success has been driven by its bread and butter, the classic cameras and premium camera lenses. Is this growing hunger for real photography if part of the reason for Leica's strong growth?
I believe the reason for Leica's strong growth has been its long-stead commitment to craftsmanship, to authenticity, to the celebration of humanity, and to to honoring the community of people who use the camera or its instrument. And so, in a world where everyone can have um, a sophisticated camera, we're seeing the opposite at Leica, right? Where, people are really holding on to um, the experience that you get with holding a Leica camera. It again, it goes back to what you feel when you put a Leica camera in your hand, the weight, the simplicity of the way it's built. It really invokes this very personal relationship between the user and the moment that they're experiencing. Leica doesn't get in the way of that moment; it enhances that moment. And so I again, I believe that Leica's commitment to the essentials and keeping things super simple are really at the core of why people relate to it. It's super intuitive. It's very easy. There isn't this built-in complication. While the product is technical, the user experience is simple.
So, outside of cameras and lenses, are there adjacent business areas you're aiming to grow?
Well, of course, today, our customers are really demanding um, of Leica to sort of build products that marry their lifestyle. And so again, when we started our conversation, Scott, we really started to talk about glass and how glass is the thing that makes like a glass, how that makes Leica so special. So today you'll find Leica in optical equipment, in sport optics, so in binoculars, whether you're going to the opera or bird seeing or uh, out uh, out on a hike. In addition to that, you'll see that today we're using our lenses in Leica lasers to bring home projection and that experience home. So we continue to grow in those areas. And most importantly, when we started this conversation, we speak about glass, but there's another important part of what Leica does, and that is that on the Leica M system, we have the rangefinder. And the rangefinder really, today we're the only camera company making a rangefinder, but a rangefinder is this mechanical movement which has over 150 moving parts. So mastering the ability to make that rangefinder is very simple, is very similar to the creation of a watch, understanding the mechanics and the glass in celebrating that moment. So we're also expanding into watches, like us, into cinematography, into um, sport optics. I think that, those are the areas where our customers are really asking to meet their lifestyle.
Many of the 20th century's most iconic documentary and street photographs were made with Leica rangefinders, especially the early 35 millimeter models. Alberto Corda's legendary portrait of Che Guevara, and Alfred Eisenstadt's iconic 1945 photo of a U.S. Navy sailor kissing a nurse in Times Square come to mind. Why were so many influential photographers drawn to Leica cameras?
Wow. I would say that Leica attracted these legendary photographers because we transformed the world of photography, right? From a staged event into an institution. Before the Leica One, everything was staged in a studio and it wasn't portable. So we created a whole new medium. When people speak about disruptive businesses, Leica was disruptive. And so I think that our development of film, I think the development of the first portable camera, so the size and the weight. And today, when you think about these legendary photographers, being able to witness something without disturbing it, when you hear the silent shudder of the Leica click, these are all the reasons. It's made of solid brass, so it's durable. For all of these reasons, I think that there is this affinity between these legendary photographers and a Leica camera. If you there are probably some other historically important photographs like Salgado
Mm.
uh, in the oil fires, and he used his Leica. He always claims that the use of the Leica protected him and gave him the comfort to get so close to that space. You can imagine using another photographic instrument, that the product might have melted. The way that the products are built, the way that they feel, and what the brand has done for the world of photography is the reason I think so many legendary photographers feel comfortable with the Leica.
How much of your business is consumer driven versus professional photographers?
We we today really serve different audiences and different clients. So when I would say we look at the world of the Leica community, we have everyone from legendary photographers such as a Steve McCurry, and Alex Webb, a Ralph Gibson, a Bruce Davidson. And then we have aspiring photographers, but yet then there's a whole group of other consumers, architects, doctors, attorneys, um, who really appreciate art and culture. Then there's yet another group of people. We're living through historic times. Taking a camera out, sort of in vein of being a photojournalist or bearing witness to the world that we live in, creates yet another area of our community. And so I would say, we believe that everyone who takes a Leica into their hand uh, is the best version of someone who, whether for personal or professional consumption, really considers them to be a photographer, Scott.
And Leica has long been considered a symbol of excellence and luxury and innovation, whose cameras function, much like luxury watches, these objects of desire and cultural capital as much as image-making tools. Leica cameras are famously expensive. New digital M series bodies often cost upwards $8,000 to $10,000 plus, and lenses adding thousands more. Like many luxury watches, Leica positions itself as a brand built on heritage, quality, and craftsmanship. How does Leica cultivate exclusivity and legacy in its marketing strategies to maintain that aura of luxury?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that we don't view ourselves just as a technology company, and that it's in fact exactly what you said, Scott, that we're a company built on heritage, legacy, tradition, craftsmanship. So, in an era of disposable technology, endless buttons, um, we're sort of bucking the trend, right? We're not part of those conversations. We really focus on the core of photographic needs, what the photographer needs. And we create a ritual that creates this intentionality with the product. And so, whether it's like the mechanical watch that we spoke about, or, um, it's really about the soul and the tactile experience you have with the product. And so one of our strongest marketing pillars is longevity over obsolescence. Leica is an expense. Leica is an investment, not an expense, Scott. So I think what we emphasize is really the craftsmanship, uh, and the long lasting value of the products. Today, you can use a lens, a Leica lens or a Leica camera from the 30s and buy a new camera today and still use that lens. So it is our commitment to quality and craftsmanship, our commitment in viewing our products as an investment and not an expense, our commitment to repair all of our products, that I think is one of our core marketing pillars. And I really have to say, I don't know that we were clever enough to do that, or we have a very discerning customer, and they keep us honest and force to really produce products in that way, Scott.
Mentioning earlier, it was your 100th anniversary last year, and under the theme 100 Years of Leica, Witness to a Century, Leica marked 100 years since the 1925 Leica One, with exhibitions and events in major cities around the world, in New York, Milan, Tokyo, Shanghai, just to name a few. The Leica One was the world's first compact 35 millimeter camera to offer images in landscape format and pretty much set the blueprint for modern cameras and, by extension, the art of photography. How did the original Leica One help define photography as a proper art form?
Well, I hate to be repetitive, Scott, but I think that I truly believe
If you
that the
must.
Leica
Right.
One created a whole genre of photography which hadn't existed before, right? Whether that's photojournalism or whether that's street photography, being able to not be encumbered by the size and weight of this big equipment really changed the game, right? So before the birth of the Leica One, photography was a challenging endeavor. Um, so Leica One changed the language of photography in three ways to an art form. The first is the compact format allowed the camera to become an extension of the human eye. You could carry the camera with you all the time and have this relationship with the world, which hadn't existed before then. And because the Leica One was so small, and you could tuck it in your pocket, you could bring it up to your eye quickly, you could be quick and fast. And by using the camera, we really changed um, the ability of people uh, to be spontaneous, to be intuitive, to be quick, to react to the world that was changing in front of them. So, yeah, the Leica One really changed the way the world sees and its ability to capture humanity.
What was the core idea behind that that exhibition, the 100 Years of Leica, and the events that surrounded it that really amplified Leica as a visual chronicler of the modern era.
Yeah, the 100 years or, and witness to a century was not really about celebrating a camera, right? It was much more about celebrating the idea that the camera allowed the world to experience. It was about celebrating humanity that the camera allowed us to see. It was about the shift in the spotlight from a tool to witnessing and photographers having the power to document the world at its most pivotal moments.
Mhm.
And in the world of AI, and the flood of digital content, the value of authentic photographs means more today than ever before. Um, our message to our community is, yeah, we call these, and whether you identify as a photographer, a storyteller, a photojournalist, a creator, we tell people that the truth matters more in the world of AI. We want our storytellers, photographers, to feel that by choosing a Leica, they make a commitment to reality. The purpose of a photograph is to stay connected in the world, not to remove ourselves from that world, with the world of AI, Scott.
And a lot has been written about the Leica community. Some have described it as this distinctive, almost cult-like subculture in a mostly positive sense, built around craft, heritage, and shared values. I was reading one owner recounts an in-person encounter with another Leica owner on the street, and how the red dot, which is the iconic red circular logo on Leica's cameras, sparks conversation, mentorship, and informal meetups. What is the strategic role of the Leica community?
Yeah. I first have to say, when someone hears the word cult, like maybe they were a little bit turned off. And I take that as a huge compliment that we have this really strong community, that some people do refer to as cult like. I think of the world in the luxury world, that's one of Leica's strongest assets. I think, the ultimate pinnacle, for brands, when you move from commodity to brand and brand to love mark, and then beyond the love mark,
Mhm.
when you create this world where your community uh, is sort of moves us from manufacturer to lifestyle to legacy. The community is at the base, um, for everything that Leica does. It's not just because they purchase a product, right, from us. Like, it's not like they buy a camera, put it on a shelf, or or someone else buying a shirt. And it's much bigger than that. It goes back to this investment or this asset that works for them in many ways. The first thing is, the little red dot is sort of like it's like a secret handshake amongst
Mhm.
people. It's amazing if you're walking down the street and you see people walking, and if somebody has a Leica camera, see that little dot, it's an immediate door opener. It sparks um a conversation, with people right away. And in a way, this community has become an informal global network of brand ambassadors for Leica. When I don't say that we have no advertising budget, but the advertising budget for a brand like Leica as a percentage of sales is so small. Our community is basically they are our brand ambassadors. And not only are they our biggest brand ambassadors, they're also our biggest critics and our most loyal protectors. If we do something that they're uncomfortable with, Scott, they come to us immediately. They make sure that we stay true to our DNA. Um, we don't build or just sell cameras. Today we have 6 stores in North America and scheduled to open 1 or 2 a year. We have 130 stores throughout the world and 30 galleries. We don't sell cameras. We build sanctuaries for photography, right?
Mhm.
Our Leica galleries, in addition to the galleries, we have something called the Leica Academy. These are places that are designed to be hubs for these creators, storytellers, sort of what I think Friends did for coffee culture. We hope that a Leica store is sort of that culture for a creative. Um, and so whether it's celebrated the printing work, whether it's protecting this community, um, I think that our community is what makes Leica so enviable by so many other luxury brands
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, over the years, Leica has collaborated with a range of luxury and fashion brands, including Hermes, Moncler, Zegna, Paul Smith, just to name a few, often via these ultra limited cameras and high-end accessories. How does Leica curate cross-category partners to either amplify or complement the brand's positioning?
yeah, I think again, when we speak about being true to our DNA and who we are and how we would like to amplify, when we curate with other partners, we look for brands that occupy the same pinnacle of their respective fields, right? We try to collaborate with those companies that have a commitment to mechanical soul or artisanal craftsmanship or lasting designs, that create these iconic designs. So we never just think about that as product placement or logo placement. We truly believe it's an opportunity to create a marriage of art and engineering with other brands that share the same cultural values as Leica.
You were talking about Leica watches before, and Leica has dabbled in watches going back into the 1980s, but it really began producing a dedicated in-house mechanical watch line in earnest in 2018 with the release of the Leica L1 and L2, which was later renamed to ZM1 and ZM2. And over the years, several non-watch brands have successfully extended into watches, often using timepieces to deepen their luxury or lifestyle positioning. Chanel, Hermes, Louis Vuitton, and your old company, Montblanc. Is it about Leica using these timepieces as another expression of the same core identity of craftsmanship and engineering?
I couldn't have said it better, Scott. A timepiece is a mechanical camera for the wrist. Having spent years at brands like Montblanc and others, I see this as a natural extension of our DNA. Um, we're applying the same vigorous German engineering and precision to timepieces that we do behind our optics, um, and behind the building of our rangefinders, solidifying ourselves as a true manufacturer dedicated to precision engineering, Scott. And so, yes, this is, I think, a holistic extension of our lifestyle. And whether our customer wants to celebrate a moment through a photograph or a moment through time, we're meeting our customers where they're asking us to meet them in a way.
We've talked about AI and we've seen an explosion of image creation in general, and AI has massively accelerated how many images exist, how easily they can be faked, and who gets to create them. And it's deepening both the power and the risks of our image-based society. We're seeing these deep fakes and AI generated visuals that are eroding trust in photos and videos overall, making it harder for people to distinguish real documentation from fabricated scenes and really undermining the confidence in media and institutions. So, do you see this as a threat to Leica's core business and its core promise and truthful photography, or more of an opportunity for Leica to position itself as a guarantor of authenticity?
I'm trying to be as emphatic as I can be. I absolutely see this as an opportunity for Leica, right? Um, with the launch of the M11, Leica was the first commercial company to partner and create content, a a program with Adobe called Content Authenticity Initiative, CAI, where we've embedded this technology into the camera, basically letting people know the provenance of the photo. And so, as I think you said, in a world where AI can manipulate reality, where it can be used to be deceptive or for ill reasons, Leica's partnership and the creation with this technology really sets us apart. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times talking about the real resurgence of photography as an art form, and they also tie it back to the insurgence of AI, where people don't know what's real or not real. So this is absolutely a moment for Leica, but I would also say for others that occupy that space for us to really get involved in making sure that we all work on technology where people can have that provenance.
So last year, most of your products focused heavily on the 100th anniversary, introducing special editions of cameras, along with, of course, major releases. What were some of the products that reflects Leica's craftsmanship and design while still integrating cutting edge technology, balancing tradition and innovation?
Oh, thanks, Scott. I think that we should start with the I would say the sort of the banner piece. We had celebrations in New York, Tokyo, Wetzlar, Germany, Milan, Singapore, um, oh, sorry, Shanghai.
Shanghai.
And in each of those markets, there was a limited edition M11 created as a highlight. And obviously, what made this M11 100 years so special was it's still a digital camera, but it had no rear screen. Again, forcing the photographer to rely on their instincts, mirroring the film experience, but with a true state of the art sensor, respecting both what's old and what's new. We released 100 of those in our New York store, which sold out immediately. In addition to that, we have two other cameras, the SO4 2 100-year edition and the Deluxe 8, which sort of bridged price points for more aspirational customers that really wanted um, to be part of that historic moment in our history.
What role do you see Leica playing in our image-based society that shapes how people perceive events, remember experiences, and really make sense of the world?
Wow. I want to say this without hubris because that's certainly not a brand value, right? We are very humble and true, but I think that Leica serves as an anchor in our image obsessed society. In a time where visuals are often used to distract or distort, we provide the tools to document. Our role, I think, is to protect the honesty of the human gaze, um, prioritize photography and mechanics, and encourage a stronger level of visual literacy. Um, we want to also act as a global partner or guarantor of authenticity to ensure that people perceive today's events and remember their own experiences that remain rooted in truth and so and sort of saving a reliable visual record for the next century, Scott.
Mhm.
Because I do think that the world of AI um, can pose a real danger to those fundamentals.
So, Mike, my final question is the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests. So, if you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one single luxury item with you, what would that luxury item be? It can't be any form of air or water transportation to get you off that island or anything that requires mobile service so you can call somebody to get you off that island. Mike, it's just you on this lonely island all by yourself, nobody around, but you do have one luxury item with you. What would that be?
Well, I don't know if this is coy, and I certainly don't want this to come off as coy, but it would be my family. For me, family is the biggest luxury that you can have, Scott. I don't know if that's a fair answer, but for me, human connectivity is the most important luxury that we have, other than time. And so, um, yeah, I would say it's my family.
Mike Giannattasio, president of Leica Camera Americas, thank you so much for joining me on the luxury item.
It was a real pleasure, Scott. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.